AI is heading in a dangerous direction. I need to do something about it. And it wasn't just writing whiny blog posts. You actually have to do something. And so the movement that I formed has a bias towards action. We need to build something.
Okay, so I am incredibly excited about this next interview with Mind the Machine. And remember, Mind the Machine is that show that really is, we're looking at the confluence between what does it mean to be a carbon-based life form in an ever mechanized world, and how do we maintain and retain our humanness. And we're also really looking at innovators who are looking at AI in different ways. And I have to tell you, I'm really delighted to have met Reza Rassool, who is the CEO of Kwaai AI. And Reza, thanks so much for coming on the show, Mind the Machine.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Cheryl. You and I met down in San Diego.
That is right.
In person. How does it feel talking to people remotely? Is it the same?
Well, I got to tell you, I think there's something about physical energy of people in the room, but hey, listen, we're going to get you any way we can get you, because after we did meet in person, I had what I think is one of the best conversations in terms of a panel that I really have ever had. I think we had good energy when we were talking at TechCon SoCal about the conflict of what it means to deploy AI and all the things that are implied in that in business, but at a personal level. And for context, you were CTO for our listeners, or CTO of Real Networks. You have an accomplished background, 75 patents, a technical Emmy, as I understand it, for Oscar-winning products, an exit to Google, a remarkable career. And even if I didn't know all that about you, having a conversation with you, you're just rich with insights about how to think about AI and technology in general. So that came through not only in person, but I'm sure it'll come through digitally as well.
Well, Cheryl, thanks for those kind words. Yeah, I've just been serially fortunate to have been in the right place at the right time. I think there are many more talented people that just did not appear on the scene at the right part of a particular hype cycle. So I've just been serially lucky and grateful to have been part of some transformative developments. And now that I'm retired and I've formed this, we'll talk about Kwaai, the nonprofit AI lab. It gives me an opportunity to reflect on the role of the technologies, or the net impact my work has had on humanity. And as people of my age come into the sort of final straight, you start thinking about legacy. You start thinking about, okay, have I actually left the place better than I found it? Those are important questions, and those weren't questions that I asked myself at the start of the journey. So I think what you're seeing in Kwaai is the result of that self-examination.
Yeah, that's great. And that reflection. And I think that was truly my first impression of you as we had that pre-panel meetup, is that you got to the issues almost immediately. I would say that my impression of you is that you don't have time to withstand things that are not, critical to understand. And we just really jumped right in. And I also observed from you too is that you're not afraid of conflict, because it seems like we have to have some measure of conflict to get to the good, to get to the root issue.
It wasn't going to be an entertaining panel if everyone was being polite to each other, and they were being overly polite in that rehearsal session. And so I said, okay, now let's get a bit of a fight going on. And it's just like the smack talk before the boxing match. If there isn't any, then.
It's not really a good show. It's
It's
not
not
a
really
good show, but but that is good. It's a good thing. See, if we were in person doing this podcast, we might have to like start jabbing each other, a little entertainment value,
that's
but
right.
we'll be kind to each other on this one. But I will ask you some provocative questions in the sense that, most of our listeners and viewers, in the case of the YouTube, I would say are emergent in their journey. They're really double clicking on what are those best business models. They're lean in learners, but not everyone is going to really understand the nuances of why an AI lab, why, what you're doing here. And so I'd love for you if you could just take it from the top. What are you doing and how are you doing it? What is
Yeah.
Kwaai? Let's get into it.
Okay. Well, look, I retired from Real Networks summer of 2023, and we all remember, 23 was the start of that hype cycle. Maybe it started November 2022, and everyone thought, "Yay! Large language models are going to solve all of our problems." And I left, retired with an angst that AI is really heading off in a dangerous direction, and unless we did something about it, we were heading towards a dystopian future. And it's not the dystopian future of the clickbaity doomer prophecies and so on that robots are going to take over the world. That probably will happen. But it'll be a different sort of takeover in the same way that electricity has taken over the world. Well, it's not plotting our domination, but we can't live without it. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship we have. So when I came to the realization that we need to do something about it, I felt like, no, I need to do something about it. That's the sort of, I don't know where that thought came from, that it's my responsibility to actually do something about it. And so the notion was to form a movement. And let me tell you that this is part of my origin story. And it's the name of the organization Kwaai is also part of my origin story. The word Kwaai comes from the tip of Africa. I was born in a town called Cape Town in South Africa during a dark time in the country's history. The prevailing regime was called apartheid, and it was a system of segregation of people by the color of their skin, and that determined their level of citizenship. And there was a certain amount of automation that was involved in it. In order to administer that type of bureaucracy, you needed to be quite advanced in automation. You needed to have databases of your population. And we saw there how technology is used to administer authoritarian control over individuals. My dad was an activist, an anti-apartheid activist. He was a member of a teachers' union that was banned under the South African government. And so his colleagues were being placed under house arrest. He left the country, went to take up a teaching position in London, and my mother brought me and my two sisters out to London. So hence the British accent. I grew up in London. All my education's been there. Had a classic British education, studied physics. Fell in with a team of software developers that said, hey, you know what? It's time now we can edit a movie on a computer. I think it's possible. And so we put together a system, and that system sold very well in Hollywood. And that was the mechanism by which I was able to move over to Los Angeles, move my family over here. And that was 30 years ago. And so I built a career around the innovations in digital audio, digital video, and that necessarily started to impinge on AI, the AI associated with that. So the origin story about being this activist streak in me comes from being born in Cape Town, coming from a long line of troublemakers. I'm glad to say, I'm proud to say, my dad was one of them. And then, if you look actually even back even further into the late 1800s, my great-grandfather was one of the, first troublemakers. And in the family history, we see a strong association between Gandhi and my great-grandfather. When Gandhi lived in South Africa, 1893 to 1914, and he lived at our family's residence in Cape Town. And so I'm proud to say I'm part of this activist streak, and like it or not, there's no way I can look at problems of the world without looking at it at a sort of a grandiose, sort of universal level. So that was it. When I said AI is heading in a dangerous direction, I need to do something about it. And it wasn't just writing whiny blog posts and saying, yeah, you see, I told you so. That really is pointless. You actually have to do something. And so the movement that I formed has a bias towards action. We need to build something rather than create more documents that'll fill the digital trash bin.
Just a quick clarification there too, and I love the history of the origin story, because that really informs the why behind the Kwaai ultimately. And what you're getting at is, I think, the part that was such a part of the hearings today. That I don't know how much of that you caught this morning, or the headlines that came from the Senate hearings today on AI, is really that ethical underpinning, right? And it's like we hear a lot about that. So I love that you're really leading with, at the end of the day, you're a person with enough experience and reflection and wisdom to know that you really do have to start there, the why, the people, and what's happened and what you've seen in the past. So I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah. So straight the congressional hearings today and actually the Senate hearings about winning the AI race. Well, I think they're framing the race incorrectly. It's the race. Is AI going to be won by 6 oligarchs, or is it going to be won by people? And currently, the trend is that 6, maybe even fewer oligarchs are going to end up winning. This is like they're treating it like the game Monopoly. The problem is, when one person owns all the wealth on the board, it's game over. That's it. The game stops. And we're running headlong towards game over. And what happens, Cheryl, when we as a family, we gather around and we play the board game Monopoly? You might recall that. And we start sensing the end game approaching. What do? We adopt behaviors that are actually not in the rules of the game. We say, Cheryl, here's $500 just so we can play longer. Why don't you take these properties, you manage them for me, and collect rent? That's not in the rule book anywhere. That's called an altruistic intervention. And what Kwaai is an altruistic intervention to make the game go longer. And so this notion of, how's the US going to win the AI race? They're just framing the question incorrectly, because the 6 oligarchs that control AI have no allegiance to the US. Their allegiance is towards capital, and capital has no allegiance to a country.
Right.
Capital will go to wherever it can get the most profit. And if you run a system, a society based on the rules of the bean counters, you end up heading towards the end game of Monopoly. And it is an end game, and it's game over. And then there's a reset. And the resets are typically really horrible for societies. So I'm going to get off my soapbox there, and we
Yeah.
can move on
Well,
to the
and
next one.
I think it's a really, it's a very, I'm just processing what you're saying and just thinking, in real time is what would have been, who else needed to be in that chair, really representing people. And I know
Represent
that you
people,
have an
right?
analogy of Linux is a lot of the
Mhm.
philosophy behind Kwaai, open community. It was interesting to me that you had Microsoft, AMD, and I think AMD is open, right? And but AMD, Microsoft, and of course OpenAI, and then I think we had a data center provider whose name I'm going to forget. But bottom line is, why not you? Who else needed to be in that chair
Right. So,
or in
so
that
there's
panel?
there's a couple of things. As a 501c3, we're actually prohibited from lobbying. 501c3s are not allowed to get involved in political activity. So we could have incorporated as a different type of tax-free entity. And what we do is we partner with those companies that are in a different part of the tax code that are actually allowed to create like amicus briefs and create and participate in legislative advisory capacities. And one of those organizations called GlearNet, and it's run by Richard Witt. And so that's how we do it. We help them out, and they go and pitch and think they're making a pitch to the UK government at the moment on the UK's version of the EU's AI regulations. So look, that's going to come, but now more than ever, I don't think we can rely on government to protect us from the excesses of big business. There's no cavalry coming. There's no cavalry coming. I tell my volunteers at Kwaai, you are the cavalry. You are the cavalry, and it's up to you to be the change. So yes, we should participate in the legislative process. It's going to take too long. Big business is just going to do an end run around there, and just historically, if we look at when big regulation has come in to curtail big business, it's normally after a horrific crash. Let's rewind back a century earlier. The level of monopolization that existed in the late 1920s was profound. There were maybe 4 or 5 oligarchs that controlled the majority, like maybe 90% of the US economy. That makes the economy very, very brittle, fragile, and unable to withstand systemic shock. We're actually in a worse situation now. We're more monopolized than we were in the late 1920s. I don't want to be a prophet of doom because, you can't just compare one to the other. I think we've got a lot of tools in the tool belt of individuals that can help turn the tide, and that's what Kwaai is. It's one of those altruistic interventions to help turn the tide of this headlong rush towards game over.
And I think when I think about the mission of Kauai and this picture that I would say that you're sharing or reflecting on is that you're equipping people with an understanding of a different way to do something. I think a lot of folks think when they think of AI, they instinctively think of open AI, right? When that's not really what you're talking about. What you're really talking about is democratized tool sets tools that aren't necessarily provisioned by big tech to enable people to use and build their own systems with their own data in private and secure way. And what does that mean? That means that your data is no longer for sale to the highest bidder, and that you can operate in autonomy with some level of actual agency. Is that a fair characterization of Kwaai?
You're absolutely right. When you think about the angst that we feel about AI, it's kind of a dull nervousness and anxiety we have. And it's really, it falls into three buckets. The first bucket is very personal, and it's about agency. You use the right word there. I mean, we're talking about agentic AI, but what about the agency for us as individuals? More and more we're feeling disempowered by big business. And it's the day-to-day assaults that we have in the way that we are forced to interact with big business, the call centers, the tyranny of the online forms and the user interface that we are assaulted with, because we're humans, but they are machines. They present themselves as machines to us, and we have to navigate that. So, hey, can't we use AI? Can't I have an agent that'll talk machine to machine on my behalf? Oh, but that agent would have to have access to all of my personal information, my communication channels, my social network feeds, my financial transactions, my calendar, my healthcare records. Okay, so that means now I don't want to send all that data up to the vendors for them to further monetize me. No, I need to keep that data local. And that's where we start from this notion of agency. Agency actually entails privacy. It allows you to control how you share that data, but it also gives you an interface, an agent that's a loyal agent, not a double agent working for some vendor to eavesdrop and spy on you, to better monetize you. No, it's a loyal agent that'll be your representative in talking with the systems of big business. So great. That's the first thing we want to do is that angst is around agency. But then when we broaden it, we think, okay, well, I'm not just concerned about myself. I'm concerned about society and the economy as a whole. That's the issue of monopoly. Okay, if you can have agency and still let the monopolization go ahead, that's also a win for us. And most people just stop at the agency part. If you're thinking broadly, you'll think about monopoly. If you're thinking about even more broadly, you think about sustainability. AI's got a horrendous carbon footprint in its current form. So we tackle AI on three fronts: on the agency, the monopoly, and the sustainability. And we want to make AI that's smarter, faster, and greener. And so one of the themes...
more controllable, right? More
yes,
at your fingertips, at your... and I have to say, too, one of my favorite words is your use of double agent. I think that is such a poetic way to explain what really is happening. Is they're not... Big tech, for all that the problems they solve, ultimately are not working for you.
They're
right?
not working for you. And, you are not, your collateral damage if there's any... Look, if there were regulations that control data in the same way that your finances were controlled, for instance, you go and deposit money in a bank and the bank loses the money, there'll be hell to pay. In fact, they'd have to reimburse you, and there might be damages beyond that. If you go deposit your data with a vendor, your personal private data, and they have a hack, oops, sorry. Oh, here's a coupon for, LastPass, or you can go and get your credit scores downloaded free of charge. Thank you very much. There's no repercussions for them. So they treat your data They harvest, eavesdrop, and spy on your data free of charge. And they regard that as their property. It's their value. And in fact, The Economist boasted 2008, hey, data's the new oil. Vendors have been treating data like that. It makes zero sense for them to be vacuuming up the data in order to build models that will predict what Cheryl wants to buy this month so that they can spam you with commercials for the products they have. Why don't they just ask you, Cheryl? Why don't the vendors just say, do you want to, is it what's on your shopping list, Cheryl? Well, there's no mechanism to do that. So that'd be job one of a personal assistant, is to say, okay, I'm going to maintain Cheryl's shopping list for Cheryl. And Cheryl is going to entitle the 24 or so vendors that she likes to be able to query and say, okay, what's on Cheryl's shopping list this month? We'd like to bid to serve her on that. And then your agent will negotiate with take competitive bids and negotiate on your behalf, and then surface up and say, okay, Cheryl, here's the things that you need. You said you needed. Here's some things that I predicted you were going to need based on, your purchases and your usage of the things you have. And here are the companies that's the sort of personal AI that would be truly empowering. And that's just for one thing. Now imagine it for, your healthcare, of dealing with insurance companies. Oh my word, dealing with all your financial transactions. You're basically seeing, we can rebalance your credit cards this way, and we can minimize your debt repayment. There's all sorts of things that a personal AI, we'd want that to do. And so what would happen, Cheryl, if you got a 10x improvement? That means, what does a 10x improvement look like for you? It's typically freeing up your time. That's the one resource that we are granted every day in equal measure. We're granted 24 hours a day, and that's it. No matter whether you're a billionaire or a pauper, that's what you're granted. So this is the one resource that is valuable to us. And if an AI can help free up some of that time, that's a value. And all of that increase in value aggregated across all of society will trickle up to the economy, to the rest of the economy, because it sure as hell ain't going to trickle down, Cheryl. It never has, and it never will.
Yeah, and I think you are really helping folks really reframe the power of autonomy and individual power that we have. And when it's in a collective form, as you're suggesting, it then becomes a mission, a movement. And I feel like most people feel very hopeless. I mean, Pew Research said 83% in aggregate for the U.S. This was last month. 56 are worried, and the remaining, 30 plus are overwhelmed. This is very high. And so I think you're tapping into that fear, that loss of agency with something that says, you can take it back. You have a right. And people are not hearing this message, which is why I'm so excited to have you talk about another solution, a third option, as it were, towards participating in AA, but not a way that feels, where you're compromised in some way.
Right. Yeah. Keep your data local. Ascribe a value to it. Your data is valuable. It's your wisdom. It's and it's, you shouldn't just give it away free of charge, because you're not going to get it back. Okay, so that's one point. The sustainability issue is well, as I said, AI has a disastrous carbon footprint. The data centers where SaaS-based AI lives are really unsustainable. You can't draw enough electrical power from the grid in order to scale these data centers to support the metropolitan community around them. And they're now talking about, building nuclear reactors to power the data centers. Sam Altman boasted that GPT-4 consumes 3 bottles of water for every 100 tokens it generates. That is just brain dead.
That is mind blowing. And a token for the audience, 4 characters. So every 4 letters, that you type in.
Sure. It varies. Maybe a token per word, maybe 1 or 2 tokens per word. But that is.
But nonetheless, there's a penalty every time you query.
When you send up a query and it generates its output, that is consuming resources that it really shouldn't. So Kwaai has a solution for that, and it's a pretty radical solution. It's very similar to the solution of the electrical grid. How do you take the stress out of the electrical grid? When it was first formed, all power was generated centrally by power stations. And more in lots of different countries, the grid is devolving its power generation to the edge. So yes, you have anchor generators that are keeping the grid, the base load up, but the edge is also generating electricity in the form of solar panels or wind turbines and stuff like that. So the same thing can happen in AI, but how's that possible? We don't have supercomputers on our desktop. No, it turns out that you can actually string together all of the computers that we have at home, at our homes collectively, and stitch them together in a peer-to-peer fabric. And we've done that. We unveiled that back in March, and it's called Kwaai. And it is a network of edge machines, of peer-to-peer machines. In fact, the very machine that I'm talking to you on now is participating in one of these community swarms. And we've shown that you can actually run an AI model distributed across multiple nodes. So that's pretty exciting. It's a fledgling project.
I would love for you for our viewers, listeners, to really, to unpack the implications of doing that. Is that you don't need what you're being told that you need in order to participate in the AI economy.
Exactly.
You're basically saying this is the option, and this option is more secure. It's actually lower cost, and it can be done relatively, easily, right? And you help them to set this up, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So imagine instead of using ChatGPT or one of the systems that's asking you to pay $20 a month to use it, you had a system that it was the community AI. Okay. A digital public infrastructure you had access to. You go and create an account on there, you get granted 1,000, 1 million tokens free. Okay. So you can use that to query, but you're going to run out of those tokens after a while. And so here I'm using the word token almost like a currency. And we create this token that's actually 1-for-1 matches the language model tokens. Okay. So now you've consumed all those free tokens you were given. How do you earn more tokens? Well, the very computer that you've got could actually be part of this network. And so while it's sitting there and you're doing nothing, it's actually earning tokens. So imagine a closed economy where you can earn tokens and redeem tokens, and you're not spending 3 bottles of water for every 100 tokens. You're not sucking electricity from. You're not requiring a nuclear power station to power. It's the same machines that you've got at home, but all we've done is we've stitched them together so that they can act in concert. And this isn't a radical approach, because this was, you recall LimeWire and Grokster and Kazaa
Oh,
and
right.
all of those
Yeah, I'm an
a long while ago.
MP3.comer, Napster era, right? Peer to
Naps,
peer.
you recall the SETI at home, or even more recently, AlphaFold. These are applications where peer-to-peer networks are used. In fact, the internet itself is a peer-to-peer network. So the notion
I
of,
think of it like blockchain
yeah,
in that sense, as this distributed network, and you're sidestepping really
right.
these big central. It's decentralized, effectively, right?
It's a decentralized. It's a fabric built by the people for the people. No central point of failure. You can't take it down. Well, that's our aspiration. I woke up this morning and the whole thing was down. So, you know,
Sorry about that.
yeah, we are building it.
Yes,
We're building it, and the volunteers are helping building it. And every time we find a
that's
point of
phenomenal.
failure, we try and tackle that and say, okay, how can we better spread this? How can we create a peer-to-peer discovery mechanism? How can we create peer-to-peer ledgers of the accounts, the token, this economy that we have? So there's still a lot of work to do, but that's the hard work that we're doing, and we think at the end we're going to get an AI that is definitely greener. We need to make it
That's
smarter
amazing.
and faster, and that's still work to go on.
Right. So I imagine the call to action for anyone who's listening that's really intrigued by this, and I can't imagine anyone who wouldn't be intrigued by this, is there's ways to help. So you're a nonprofit. So if you're really moved, you could make a donation. I understand you've raised $9 million
Yeah,
already, or
well, last the annual report we delivered last year, 9.2 million of in-kind donations. Um, just recently at our summit, we held a hackathon, and Intel very kindly donated 50,000 in cloud credits. So these are in-kind donations. It's not cash. In fact, we're kind of allergic to cash. In-kind donations are good. Cash will
okay.
probably destroy our organization. I've seen it happen to other organizations. Um, and then Perplexity, we're very grateful. Perplexity donated pro accounts to the tune of forty
That's
thousand
wonderful.
dollars. So, and then some other vendors. There's a company called Mimic, which is in the business of sort of cloud, hybrid cloud edge orchestration. So it's an IoT type of orchestration or choreography. They don't want to call it orchestration, so it's a choreography instead of complex behavior in distributed networks. So these are like-minded companies that are all, trying to figure out how to play together. There are lots of other great vendors that have helped us along the way. A data center called iBridge in Sacramento, they donated hosting for us. There's a company called Swiss Vault that's in the business of distributed storage, and they set up some Quainet nodes in Canada. And we've got, so we're grateful for the
So there's a
volunteers.
groundswell.
Yeah.
Yeah, of companies and people. There's this groundswell that you're really tapping into, and you're, 800 volunteers. Love that you mentioned Perplexity. I'm a huge fan of Perplexity. They've been very helpful for Startup San Diego, which you may know. I spend a lot of time developing programming and hackathons for them. And so I love that you're tapping into that, and that you're also demonstrating this is just not some, outskirt effort, that many other people are seeing this in the same exact way, and they're rising with their credits and their assets to help you build this network. So that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So what would you ask folks to do? What would be that need that you would have, that in order for this mission to move forward with great intention, what do you need?
No, it's really good. What would you ask folks? So first of all, we come at it over who are the folks, and they're really three buckets, three personas that we would target. We target the personas that are in my Rolodex. So these are kind of technology professionals at all levels of their career. Anyone can come and join. If you are between jobs, out of a job, or you've got spare capacity even in your existing job, come and volunteer. We make use of your tired hours and your time between jobs. Definitely don't be unemployed. Don't be unemployed. Come and do a tour of duty at Kwaai. You'll network. You might even get a job out of it. Many people have. You'll definitely come away smarter than you did before you arrived. So those are the tech folks. And if you are at a significant level, let's say you're a community manager, or you're looking for developer adoption for your tech platform, you're in the tech world, come and participate with us. We can get you that developer adoption if your technology is aligned with what Kwaai is building. So that's the one bucket, and they probably are existing helpers. The bucket in the middle are the sort of social activists and the community organizers. We need that. This is a movement. And no matter what we were doing, if we were a movement for, mental health, or a movement for financial literacy, or anything like, you still need a movement. If this was a soccer bomb movement, then you need that organization. And frankly, that's the thing that limits our growth. It's actually the ability to harness the energies of everybody. And so just that community organizing, we need that. Right. The third bucket, which we completely ignored and which we really need to focus on, is the bucket of donors, of charitable donors, of philanthropists. And we really need to sort of tap into that. People that want to target their wealth in an activist way. They're looking for the donor advised funds. So they want to target their
So like legacy. They want
exactly. It's basically the boomers. It's the boomers that feel a twinge of guilt that, we probably are the generation that are leaving the world in a worse state than we found it for the following generation. Kids don't have it as easy as we had when we started out. You can't afford to buy a home. You can't afford to run a domestic economy on a single income. And you can barely do it on two incomes. It's the state that they've left. So now you've got these folks, potential philanthropists, wherever they are, whether they are looking at their making their will out, or they're looking at how to target their wealth. They can do that by so that's a job on me. This is you've asked the right question, and frankly, we've been so focused on this being a technical problem, and we actually need to think broader than that. And so this is hot off the press, these sort of bucketing of who is our target audience and what is the ask?
No, this is good. Yeah, this is good, because I think most folks can recognize that what you're doing is important.
Yeah.
And it's underserved. This opportunity is underserved. I think most folks, too, do want to do good things. And half the time it's finding and curating that right place to park your resources. And so I think it's a great call to action. And we'll make sure that we plug in your URL and all those great things for folks to get plugged in. I'd like to, if I could, and feel free to shift this back to the other question but I'd like for it to double click a bit on the concept of personal AI. And when you use that context of personal AI, what does that mean to you? And how should a consumer, a student, an individual, maybe not so technical, how should they think about a personal AI for themselves? Is that a bot of themselves, secure bot? What does that look like?
Um, well, we're figuring it out. There's some great thinkers within Kwaai. One of the visionaries is a fellow called Steve Vitka, who's said, well, you know, your AI agent isn't really just one agent; it's a collection of agents, and so there is. If you imagine you're the CEO of your own company, then what who would you have? What are the roles that work for you in that company? Well, there's a personal assistant like your EA, your executive assistant that has your calendar and has all of your most personal information. Maybe not all of it. You might want to filter that. So there's that role, and that's the first tier around you. But the outward facing roles, like your chief marketing officer, your CFO, your legal counsel, and so on, is the next tier. And then you might have a front desk that is your reception, that is basically just routing things and actually repelling others. And so we see this personal AI as a collection of agents. We call it my personal agency. And so now,
like an operating system, a
it's
network.
an operating system, right?
Okay, great.
And so
great.
we've put together this thing called PIOS, the Personal AI Operating System, and it's somewhat aspirational. You know, we've not released it on the world, although the GitHub repository is open for anyone to go and participate in it. But imagine you'll have your own agency is in fact a collection of agents that are loyal to you, and they interact with other systems. They could interact with my personal agent, could interact with yours, and it does this on this peer-to-peer fabric. We're also going to be interacting with vendors, but wouldn't it be great if you in the morning you had a conversation with your own personal assistant and said, hey, what's new today? And it tells you, okay, here are the messages that came in overnight. These are the things that are high priority. I've drafted responses for each of them for you to review. They're in your inbox and you can edit and send them. The rest of the stuff, here's the things that I've unsubscribed you from. The junk messages that came in.
Yeah.
But it's able to actually resolve this across multiple communication channels and across multiple domains of data.
So much like an agent would, the promise of agent in enterprise, small to medium business, actually all business of all sides, that same promise of agency, but more securely with your own data, and
Right.
you're not going to have to worry so much.
Indeed. And the way that existing vendors would solve that, say, hey, send all your data, stream all your data up to us, and we will charge you a fee for doing that. Oh, meanwhile, we'll also figure out what of your data we can sell to others, to give them insights so they can, they can spam you with commercials. Yeah, that just no more of that, please. Let's rethink a different way of solving this. And so we want to give people the tools to be able to do that themselves. And so that's what personal AI means technically.
It's a big idea.
Right. It's a big idea.
Yeah, that's such a big idea. I love it though. I mean, I think it's so right on.
Well, let's hope we can achieve it. I think in that way, AI can be truly uplifting for humanity, not just for a few oligarchs.
Coming back now to really AI for the common good, what do you think of all the things that we should genuinely worry about? And there's really no shortage of things, I think. I do try and think about hope,
Mhm.
what encourages you? What inspires you? What gives you hope in this age where so many are worried? Aside from what you're already doing, obviously you're giving folks options, but what does encourage you? What are you excited about?
We took inspiration from Linux, as I said. Linux was a revolutionary movement in its early days, also in opposition to monopoly. It was in opposition to the monopolization of the server operating system space. And along came Linux, non-profit, open source, volunteer movement, and now Linux is the dominant operating system, and the industry is healthier for it. So I thought, wow, let's build the Linux of AI. Well, we're in a
I
different
love that.
era
I saw
now.
Doc Searles is on your board, right? Did I see that
Exactly.
right
So
from
Doc
the
Searls,
Linux Journal?
yes.
Yeah.
So Doc and a lot of his sort of that sort of cohort of bearded sandal wearers are part of the Kwaai movement.
Chris Perillo and others. I worked for a Linux distribution at one point, so I that's a good crew. That's
It's
for
a good
sure.
crew, and they had their heart in the right place, and they also know the pitfalls of movements like this, and they've got definitely the war stories and the scars to prove it. And so we took inspiration from Linux. The cool thing is that the open source movement is so mature now that we don't have to write all the code ourselves. We can go and cherry pick from the best of existing open source and put it together. This is the one thing that we can do that the for-profit sector can't do, because the for-profit sector, all the intellectual property is siloed into individual companies. And unless one company decides, oh, we're going to open source this, they the others don't get a chance to sort of cross-pollinate ideas. And so this notion of not invented here, or the sort of jealousy that people have in companies about their intellectual property, that seems to not exist within the open source movement. So we've been able to say, as we're on our road to building PIOS and building QuaiNet, we're saying, hey, what we've written here is just completely dumb. Here's another group that's done it better than ours. Let's go and fork their repo and bring it in, or let's contribute to their repo, and then make use of their technology. This is the nature of open source, and this is the strength that we have. And so I think it's not a hopeless situation. I think we actually have history on our side.
And then just the mass amount of folks that can participate. And so I would say, as a call to action to listeners out there, is this is something that is worthy of trying to understand more. That the concept of Linux and open source, and it's also part of the ire behind why folks struggle with open AI, just even in their naming nomenclature. I understand now that they're going to be reoriented as a public benefit corporation. I think that was mentioned today in the
They're going to
hearings.
call themselves Closed AI. What are they renaming themselves?
Yeah. I think I heard Elon Musk say last year, oh, they should have named themselves Closed and Stupid as opposed to, open artificial intelligence. But whatever, I don't want to get political. But bottom line is this is such a breath of fresh air. And this is, I think, where when we met in person at TechCon SoCal and you were talking about this, is that you had just such great insight about this untapped power. The community can participate really unfettered without double agents in a way that was altruistic and cheaper. And so it's you are Mr. Good News, if you ask me.
Well, okay, so
Or Dr. Good News.
yeah, maybe no. Mister's just fine. Yeah, look, call to action. People need to come and join. I'm not difficult to find on LinkedIn, and so we'd love. Look me up and go to the Kwaai.ai website. That's great. You can figure out how to participate. we could do better in all these things. If you're a web designer, come along and help us improve the website. If you're a community organizer, come and join so that we can organize our community better, so that we can engage the 850 members more actively. And yes, we've got developers by the spades, but we need to also target those other sectors. As I mentioned, we actually need to up our game in the sort of philanthropic activity. Yeah. Gosh, there's a lot to do.
Speaking of a lot to do, I know you have a packed schedule, and I really could talk to you for hours, but I won't torture you much further. I'm going to give you 2 more questions, and then we'll land this plane.
Yeah, great.
Okay, so the first question is that it's a kind of trite question, but I think it's fun and revealing. Is a blast from the past. If you could talk to anyone, have a dinner party with anyone, who from the past would you sit down and talk to about Kwaai, and how would you explain that to them? And actually, it really could be anyone, but I assume it's someone from the past. You mentioned Gandhi earlier. Would it be Gandhi? Who would you sit down at a dinner table to and explain what you're doing to?
I don't know what I'd have to say to Gandhi.
Good job.
I really don't, and frankly, yeah. I mean, that would be okay. That would be an interesting one, but I think I'd be just completely. I'd be lost for words. There are folks like Richard Feynman. He'd be an interesting fellow to talk to. My original degree at King's College was a degree in physics, and so I'm like most physicists who came away with this feeling that no, I don't think my professors really have a clue of what's going on, and come away with a feeling that okay, this is nobody knows what they're talking about. And that's still the situation. And I find most people that were, I guess, burdened with the problem of physics, of trying to understand the fundamental laws of nature itself, suffered the rest of their life still trying to find that and trying to bring that together. So here's one of the research threads at Kwaai in our fundamental AI research is a particular area called physics-inspired neural networks. And it's where you say it's the complete antithesis to the current thinking in AI. In AI, we throw our hands up and say, well, I don't understand the underlying mathematics of this particular problem, but I've got historical data. So I can train a model and I can give it input data and it'll predict new output data. Okay. That I denigrated as the height of intellectual laziness. So you've got the algorithmic folks that say, no, let's find the underlying physics in the problem. And then those people say, no, you can't solve it, but you've got historical data. The answer is somewhere in between. And so there's this whole domain called physics-inspired neural networks. And that's the path that I was going down even before I formed Kwaai. And so it's one of the research groups within Kwaai, we're pursuing that. And so a guy like Richard Feynman, who I used to have the collection of his lectures, and I think it would be fantastic to have a conversation with him and say, okay, since you passed away, here's what's been going on. Physics has made no progress, but the AI group have got this idea. Do you think that there's a correspondence between the neural network that's described in AI and the wave function that you describe in quantum mechanics? And I think there is. But you need someone like Richard Feynman to have that conversation with to actually figure it out.
I could never really, I think, fully understand all the implications of what you're doing and to get all the goodness of the impact. So what didn't I ask you that you think is really important for folks to know that maybe we've not touched on? Or do you want to reemphasize any point about the importance of the mission at Kwaai?
I think it's just getting people to participate. It's tough. People's lives are so busy. The thing that I mentioned, the one thing we're granted with every single day is 24 hours of time. And unfortunately, in our current the way that society and the economy is structured, all of that is consumed. You're left utterly exhausted. And so, but I'll urge people to try and find that that spare time to donate to Kwaai. I think that's what we need. What didn't you ask? Well, we've got weekly public meetings every Friday at 10 o'clock Pacific time. And so anyone can jump in. The coordinates for it are on the Kwaai website, Kwaai.ai. Right to the very top, there's a button, and that's the 10 o'clock Pacific time Zoom link. If you press it, it'll take you right into the Zoom meeting. It's free. It's open for anyone to participate. And that's where the community comes together, and we basically give an update of what's happened during the week.
Right. And I think that that's really well said. People are really busy, but also, too, there's so many people in transition. It's part of the reason why I started the podcast. I wanted to give folks access to people they may not have the privilege to run into. And, like you had said earlier, you felt a lot of luck about your career path. I feel like I've had a lot of luck. I've been fortunate to meet a lot of great people like yourself that are doing phenomenal things. And so I want to bring a platform so folks can connect. So opening that, jumping in, yet that Zoom call on Friday at 10, what a great example of a way to say, I also have access to understand how this movement is forming. And I would, encourage folks to check it out, to do this. And we're all learning in real time. And I just have to really thank you for your transparency, your honesty, your reflection, your ethical underpinning, your commitment, your origin story, and your fantastic terms like double agent. Wow. It's not every day you get to say that.
So the double agent thing is from Bruce Schneier. He's a cryptographer at Harvard University, and that's his term. So, but I borrowed it.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a keeper. It's a keeper. But Reza, so are you. And so I look forward to continuing the conversation, and hopefully we'll see each other on a panel soon at some AI conference.
Right. Thanks so much, Cheryl. You're a fantastic, very generous host. Thank you.
What a phenomenal conversation with Reza Rassool, CEO of Kwaai. I don't know if you picked this up, but I certainly felt this vibe of AI for him is deeper than a tool. It's deeper than an automation. It seems like a spiritual journey for him. Got me to really thinking about, even as I've done this show, now we're in the 12th, 13th show, is what are people really resonating with? And what they're resonating with is that hope, that way to get really to do business better, but also to do things in a way that is actually of value and more intentional. So just planting a seed here with all of y'all's out there is that I really am going to start to deeply dive into those questions that you've asked me relative to what does it mean to use AI purposefully and spiritually, and how folks might be deifying this tool when the reality is we're talking about something that's coming from big tech. So let's put it in a context of good. AI for global health, poverty alleviation, all the needs that we need, economic prosperity, but also to what does this mean to you as a human, a spiritual being, and how does that orient with your faith? So with that, I'll share with you that I'm very interested in sharing more about that journey. And to that end, been talking to a lot of universities, including Point Loma Nazarene College, as well as Biola just recently last week, and looking at how can you be educated technically, but also spiritually. So with that, thank you so much for watching and or listening. And as always, please subscribe and make sure that you're listening on all platforms. Well, you don't have to listen to all platforms at the same time, but please, no, you could go anywhere. I could be in your car with you, or you can look at and check out all those great resources we provide. Thank you for your time and your attention for Mind the Machine podcast.